What's good in the whole YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here, bringing us another video. Today I'm bringing us a video on Kishiryu Sentai Ryusoulger, and this will be on episodes 14 and 15. These episodes were really good. I actually already made this video, but I ended up forgetting to turn the on my mic, so I had no audio. So let me get started with this. So episodes 14 and 15 introduced Ryusoulger. It introduced his mecha. It introduced his weapons changer, a family member of his motive, a whole bunch of things were introduced. It introduced a new major villain, and it also introduced a couple other things that were really cool, but really good episodes overall. So let's get started. Episode 14 is called The Golden Knight. So this episode starts off with us hearing a story from Yui's father about this person that went to the sea for 200 years and then came out of it. And the thing is that this story, he used to be confused by the idea of 200 years, and it made sense to him once he ended up learning of the Ryusoulgers, and so then he thought that maybe this guy could be one of them. And so what happens is that we end up seeing that Yui is trying to figure out what her new channel update should be for her blog channel that she does, and what happens is that she ends up seeing that there's this guy that's trying to hit on this girl, and the thing is that he's offering her a flower, and the girl doesn't really find him anything special and finds him a bit extra, like extreme, and he seems to go out of his way a little too much, and he's a bit of an eco-friendly guy, like a little too eco-friendly for her taste, and so she basically rejects him. But then he ends up finding this girl named Akane, and he ends up trying to hit on her, and she accepts him. However, there is like other issues there, but the point is that yes, there is something going on there, and he offers her a rose. But then there's this Minosaur that shows up, and the Minosaur is called the Kelpie Minosaur, and this Minosaur ends up attacking them, and the guy ends up transforming into Ryusoulger. Ryusoulger, by the way, his name, for those that are wondering, is Kanalo. So Kanalo ends up transforming. We end up seeing him use his Moza changer, and also uses his Moza sword to battle the Minosaur, and also battle some Drun soldiers. Eventually Yui ends up returning back home and ends up showing them pictures of Ryusoulger, how he looks, so that they can find him in person, and they do. And then what happens is that he ends up returning to he ends up battling them and then retreats. We do end up seeing as well inside of the Minosaur, like where the Drenans are, that a new general comes in, and his name is Gotras, and Gotras comes in and he basically takes over for Weisel, and Weisel basically leaves for now. He doesn't get defeated, so what that likely means is that Gotras will stay there for some time, and either he'll be defeated and then Weisel will return, or something else will happen that will lead to Weisel's return. We're not sure yet, but Gotras seems a little bit more intimidating than Weisel was, because Weisel was a little bit more flamboyant and a little bit more showy in comparison to this guy Gotras, who seems a little bit more serious. Not as serious as Tank Joe, but still very serious. He seems to command a lot more respect overall compared to either of them, but it's still very different. So what we do end up seeing is that the Ryusoulgers end up trying to find Kanalo. They end up Ko and Asuna find him, and they try to recruit him, and he rejects them. What does end up happening as well is that he ends up speaking to this girl, and we end up seeing that this girl has a boyfriend, and the boy ends up actually feeling ill, and so Akane brings him back to his home to rest. And what does end up happening is that eventually the Minosaur, I believe he ends up going after the girl to kind of help out, and he realizes that he can't have her, so he leaves at that point. But we do end up finding out that this guy is the one that's was created from, the Minosaur was used to make, like the Minosaur was made from this guy's negative feelings. So what happens is that he struggles with trying to come across as being a person of wealth when in reality he's not super wealthy, by buying these luxury name brands and everything like that. And so he struggles in his work. And so what happens is that eventually Kanalo ends up heading off on his way. And what we do end up seeing is that eventually the Minosaur ends up attacking. And what we do end up seeing is that the Ryusoulgers try to fight the Minosaur. They don't do very well. Eventually, Kanalo comes in. He transforms because he wants to protect the love of these people. So he ends up defeating the Minosaur, and that leads to an easy win. What this does is that, you know, things are good for them, and we end up learning that his motive is to find a bride. So what ends up happening is that that's why he's on land now, and we end up learning that he does come from the Ryogu place, which is underwater, and that's where he came from, and he eventually retreats and leaves. At this point, what we do end up seeing as well is Mosa Rex, which is the mecha for Kanalo, and otherwise not too much else was introduced in this episode. As far as details for Kanalo that I could say up front, just based on his appearance and everything like that, he does share, he is one of 3 character Sentai members ever to actually have the color combination he has, which is gold and blue, which is one of the better combinations. And also his abilities are very similar to another dinosaur themed member character in the past that shares his colors, which is Kishiryu Gold. Kishiryu Gold was the other gold and blue, and the other one that I'm thinking of is Maji Shine from Maji Ranger. Not to mention, if you haven't noticed, and if you listen to it carefully, I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure the end theme is done by the same person that did the end theme for Maji Ranger. I could be mistaken, but their voices sound very similar if they're not the same. I'm just saying that up front, but that is interesting. Now, as far as things go otherwise, episode 15, let's get started with that. Episode 15 is called King of the Deep Sea. And this episode gives us more explanation as to why the reason why he rejects the Ryusoulgers in the first place. And we also end up learning some other things as well. So let's get started with this. So the episode begins with us seeing that Kanalo is, just looking around still, and he ends up putting his hands in some water, and he's able to use his telepathic ability to communicate with Mosa Rex from the sea, even though he's not physically there. And he uses this ability to communicate with him and basically, talk to him about the situation, how he does trust the Ryusoulgers, even though Mosa Rex still says to not trust them. And so what ends up happening is that we end up also meeting his sister, his sister's name is Otto, and she wants to come to the land and find a husband, and Kanalo doesn't want her to. And his sister's very young. In fact, she looks like she's probably like 10 or something, even though she's supposed to be 103. And so the reason why I think that is because most likely, he looks like someone in his 20s, and she looks like she's someone that's about 10 or 11 years old. So I'm guessing the idea that they're trying to portray is that, like, for every 10 years, that's the equivalent to like 1 year of being a normal human life, because that's the only way that I could see that making sense. Just because of the fact that they look a certain way, because obviously if you're going to live to a 200 and something, you'd look really old normally as a regular person, but with him being someone that probably is in his 20s, that's the logic that I see. So, again, as far as things go, she ends up wanting to go on land, but Kanalo forbids her. She does end up escaping to land. What we do end up seeing as well is that Kanalo ends up getting into this battle eventually with a Minosaur, because what actually happens is that we end up seeing in the Ryusoulgers base that there's this scientist who's talking about magnets and everything like that, and Kiran ends up using this guy to create a Minosaur that's based off magnets, and so they end up using that to create the effect of Polaris the Polaris effect to actually separate them from each other, so that, in other words, it separates loved ones from each other, whether it be a mother and a daughter, or a happy couple, or friends from each other. And so he uses it to separate this husband and wife from each other, that sends the wife super far away, I believe. And so what ends up happening is that Kanalo transforms, he ends up fighting the Minosaur, and we see that things work out pretty well for them. Now, as far as things go otherwise, what can I say? We do end up seeing that he is approached by... He ends up finding out that his sister had escaped, and so he ends up figuring out that she probably went on Earth, like went to the land, and ends up finding her. And she ends up making an excuse to her brother, basically saying that I came here because I was worried about you, and I just wanted to just, comfort you a little bit. And in reality, she was looking for a husband. Now, what I forgot to also mention is that because of the Minosaur losing, and because of how it came across, Gytra's felt that Creon didn't really have a plan, and so Chiron has to come up with one, and so he ends up going off with the Minosaur to figure out one, and he ends up seeing this whole interaction with Kanalo and Otto, and he ends up taking advantage of the situation by trying to capture Otto so that she could be used in the plan. And so what happens is that after Kanalo and Otto's talk, Chiron ends up capturing her. And what we do end up seeing is that the Ryusoulgers end up discussing things back in the base, because what does end up happening is the Ryusoulgers end up interacting with Kanalo, and they still want to help him. But the thing is that Bomba and Toa know that they shouldn't trust him, because the thing is that there was a story behind why he's not trusting them, which is the fact that in the past the Ryusoul tribe had two different groups, which were the Ryogu and the main Ryusoul tribe. And the thing was that the two sections, one was land, one was sea, ended up getting into a fight with each other, which led to the ones from the sea going under the ocean, while those that were from the main part of the Ryusoul tribe stayed on land. And so the thing was that because of that, there's been this distrust with them that's prevented them from coexisting, and so that's why they don't get along so well. Though it does come across that Mosarex more so is in support of this idea compared to Kanalo. And so what does end up happening is that the Ryusoulgers end up dealing with a monster track that is found, and so they end up having to get into a battle. We do end up seeing as well that a girl is separated from her mother, and her mother is sent flying a huge distance away. Ko ends up trying to bring the girl to safety, and what we do end up seeing as well is that Kanalo gets involved in the battle that they have, because they don't do very well against the Minosaur, which is the Pond Minosaur. And so what happens is that they have to deal with that. The Pond Minosaur is also based off of the Unicorn Minosaur, which the Unicorn Minosaur was in episode 2. And so what we do end up seeing as well, that's what was in episode 14 as well. 14 started with the Basilisk Minosaur, that's what I forgot. That's the first thing that Kanalo fought. So anyway, what does end up happening is that we end up seeing that the Pond Minosaur uses his effect to separate the Ryusoulgers from each other, except for Gold and Red, because they don't have a connection to each other, and like Red wasn't sent flying in this case. And so what happens is that they're sent to different parts of Japan, except for Ryusoul Red and Ryusoul Gold, and the two of them end up working together to defeat the Minosaur. Though they're not really friendly, but they show some friendliness towards each other that eventually leads to them temporarily almost splitting up. And also the Minosaur uses his repulsion effect, except in this case, instead of using the repulsion, he uses the attraction effect to attract a whole bunch of things to him to kind of keep him in place so that he can't attack. What we do also end up seeing is that they're put in a situation where they're going to try to battle the Minosaur, but then Otto is shown, and the idea is that if they fight the Minosaur, then Otto will be destroyed, and so they have to keep her alive. What does end up happening is that eventually the Minosaur turns big, and the other Ryusoulgers appear with their mechas, and they try to stop the Minosaur. but Ko ends up summoning his mecha and basically tells them that they can't fight because if they fight, then Kanalo's sister will be, destroyed. So they end up stopping fighting, and what does end up happening is that the Minotaur does manage to make them fall out of their mechas. And at that point, what does end up happening is that Ko is still in his mecha, which is Kishiryu, and he has to stay in there for now, because what happens is that they're put into a situation where Kanalo can't get his sister unless he defeats Real Soul Red, and he does something which is smart, even though it comes across as like, why is he doing such a thing at first, which is he's using the Coil Soul against Kishiryu, and also using the Shocking Soul, which are the two souls that he so far has really used to attack Kishiryu. And what happens is that though this comes across as more of a harmful thing, it's actually beneficial, because what this does is that it's actually getting rid of the repulsion effect that's present because of the Pawn Minotaur. And so what this allows them to actually do is combine later on. So what actually ends up happening is that after this, Kanalo ends up sending, Auto into the ocean, and she ends up being caught inside Mozarex's jaws, and it's fine because the thing is that typically they travel by Mozarex inside of its mouth, and so a Mozarex wouldn't hurt her. So the thing is that all happens. The Ryusoulgers then know that they can transform because of the fact that they remove the effects of the repulsion that was created by the Pawn Minotaur. So they end up creating Kishiryu 5 Knights to defeat the Minotaur and win. Though the one that actually does the finishing attack is Mozarex. He actually grabs the Minotaur in his jaws, and then he completely rips off the horns from the Minotaur and destroys it. So at that point, things are good. We do end up having this nice exchange between the Ryusoulgers and Kanalo, but Kanalo ends up leaving them, and he ends up retreating into the ocean eventually. In the ocean, we end up seeing that Auto and Kanalo end up speaking to Mozarex, who still doesn't trust the Ryusoulgers because he thinks that they're trying to deceive them. So what happens is that Kanalo still rejects the Ryusoulgers in joining their team. Otherwise, not too much else happens. The only thing I forgot to mention, 2 things. First of all, episode 14, I wanted to mention this, which was that we end up seeing how Kyoran actually makes Minotaurs, which he actually, since he's like a mushroom, he actually has this sap-like ability, which allows him to create sap that, if put into a person's body, it will actually create the effects of producing a Minotaur. So that's what actually allows him to do that. And so in episode 14, there's a point where Gotras basically asks him to make 500 Minotaurs based off of that Minotaur. So in other words, if he gets enough sap fluid from him, he can actually create that many Minotaurs. So the thing is that he doesn't get to do that, but we also see this exchange with him where he's actually remembering, different situations where Tangjo didn't want him to laugh versus Wiseau where he insists upon him laughing. That's an interesting thing. Otherwise, not too much else. We also see in episode 15 the actual process of a Minotaur being made from the sap, when Kyoran actually puts his sap into the scientist directly. Otherwise, we also end up seeing the powered up mode for for Real Soul Gold, which is the Berry mode. So we have the Berry mode for Real Soul Gold and the Mara mode for Real Soul Red. Not too much else. Episode 16 preview, I wanted to mention as well. The preview ends up showing us the Kishiryu Neptune, which is the mecha transformed form for Mozarex. So we'll be seeing that probably next episode. Well, we will. And then also what we're going to be seeing probably in the next few episodes is Spinal Thunder, Spinal Thunder, which is the combination of Dime Volcano and Mozarex into one mecha. So that's something to look forward to as well. As far as whether or not there is a combined mode for Mozarex and Kishiryu, think there might be, but I don't remember right now. I know for sure that there's the Dime Volcano and Spin-O Thunder. Otherwise, most of the newer combinations that should be coming out in the near future will be for new things entirely, I'm pretty sure, and we should be seeing stuff fairly soon. Again, we're into July now, so July is supposed to be the month that we should see like Spin-O Thunder and maybe like one other thing, and then next month we'll introduce something new. So otherwise, that's about it for me. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, tell me what you guys think. And I'll see you guys in the next video. So nothing guys, I'm Crazy 701, and goodbye guys.